Chapter 7. Frankenfood and Robotic Rabbits. The Future of What We Eat. You may go into the fields or down the lane, but don't go into Mr. McGregor's garden. Your father had an accident there. He was put in a pie by Mrs. McGregor. Beatrix Potter, The Tale of Peter Rabbit. There's a key concept when it comes to ecology and the survival of species called carrying capacity. This is the notion that each environment has a set limit of how many individuals of a species it can accommodate with the resources available. Humans broke this rule the day that agriculture was invented. As soon as we were able to manipulate the amount of food and other resources that could be produced, we changed the rules and stretched the natural limit. On a planetary scale, we're at risk of being overcome by factors such as disease, genetic modification, and climate change. And still we continue to pursue two things to an extreme. One is change and innovation, and the other is keeping things exactly as they have always been. Agtech, agricultural technology, is a growing sector in many developed economies and a huge area of investment and opportunity, particularly the Antipodes. Over the past 10 years, it's been valued globally at US $189 billion. The sector is ripe for technological disruption because it is on the bleeding edge of a number of existing and emergent crises, including weather disruptions, biosecurity issues, supply chain evolution, reduction in the number of seasonal workers, and all of the worst of the climate crisis, more extreme weather events, floods, droughts, fires, and human pressures such as the demand for produce that looks perfect. So, how will we feed the extra billion mouths that are due to arrive in the next few years? How can we farm more, waste less, spend less, and create fewer climate-changing emissions while we're doing it? The answer is definitely not how we've always done it. It lies in developing and funding multimodal cutting-edge technologies to work on the land, in the sea, and in an anthropogenic, closed-loop urban farming solution. Feast or famine. Experts estimate that in the Western world we now throw out about a third of all the food we produce. This is nigh on criminal. This shocking statistic has led to public outcry about the standards imposed by the supermarket chains, expecting our farmers to not only produce fruits and vegetables that are of uniform size and shape, but at one end of the scale we have 1 billion people on the planet unable to get enough food, and at the other we have 1 billion people overweight who are overloaded with calories but possibly still malnourished in terms of essential nutrients. We are also still living in a world in which famine continues to be used as a weapon of war. One of my earliest childhood memories is of the awful famine in Ethiopia in the 1980s and the subsequent Live Aid concerts and Band Aid records to raise money to get food into the mouths of starving people. The BBC News Bulletin by Michael Burke started with these words: Dawn, and as the sun breaks through the piercing chill of night on the plain outside Coram, it lights up a biblical famine, now in the 20th century. This place, say workers here, is the closest thing to hell on earth. Thousands of wasted people are coming here for help. Many find only death. It turned out that this famine wasn't solely about low annual rainfall and the subsequent failed harvests at all, but also war and politics. I can still remember the video and photo coverage of that time and the general sense that people in the West wanted to help, but food and geopolitics, it seems, are inextricably linked. There has to be another way to ensure that no one else starves to death because of conflict. Unfortunately, though, as I write this, famine is raging in Yemen and being exacerbated by conflict. So, how can technology help prevent famine? Well, the way in which we grow food is going to substantially change in the next few years, and one of the largest hurdles to advancing food security globally is the adaptation and adoption of new technologies in different countries. Imagine the local knowledge that should be applied when adapting new methodology, and also the new power and water systems that will be aligned to new methods of smart farming. This isn't calling existing methodologies stooping farming, but the reality is that new methodologies are available that were not available to farmers over the past few thousand years, including the advent of precision agriculture, data science, and AI-backed operations. One of the most pressing issues in current agricultural practice is sustainable soil management. Soil is a magical thing deserving of its very own book. My PhD was on soil microbial ecology, the relationship between bacteria, fungi, actinomycetes and other tiny organisms that function in the soil nutrient flow and the food webs that keep everything running. I looked at how to model the function of soils in terms of change management with a view to creating predictive statistical models of behaviour. Some recent studies have described current soil management methodologies as irresponsible and linear in their thinking, with one study calculating that under current techniques we only have about 60 harvests left on a global scale. This would mean that if we keep going the way we are going, there will be a global famine within my children's lifetime. We should be worried. The oceans are also under pressure, suffering issues of overfishing, dead zones, areas that have too little oxygen to support marine life, and plastic, but they will be expected to provide more food. More novel methods are being touted of sustainable aquaculture of protein, sources including oysters, abalone, mussels, and other fast-growing seafood. There's also a growing market for macroalgae, such as kelp, with kelp burgers now becoming very fashionable in California. Legislation, politics, and mad cow moments. We need to talk more about life cycle analysis, LCA, when it comes to the food we put on our plates. Some purported food solutions are actually worse for us and the environment once the entire life cycle of creating, transporting and disposing of the product's waste is considered. Some 20 years ago, the big push was for low food miles, encouraging the wealthy and those with choices to look for local produce. But in the UK, buying locally reared lamb actually had a higher carbon footprint than eating New Zealand lamb, slaughtered and deep frozen before distribution, so none of the ethics of live transport applied. Despite the shipping emissions, due to the manner in which the UK lambs were reared and the extra feed they were provided, which had to be grown. So if a reduction in carbon footprint was the main goal, then the New Zealand lamb would have been the answer. However, if the desire was to support local food security in the agriculture sector, then the local lamb would have been it. There is no clear right or wrong answer to the choices within our complex and global food supply chains. We just have to do the best we can with the information provided at the time. If we want our food to reflect our environmental codes and moral ethics, we need to be prepared to pay for it. We need to vote with our shopping trolley before it's too late for those in industry who are trying to do the right thing, or the lesser of two evils. An example of this is the UK's pork industry, which has become more expensive and therefore less competitive, partially because of animal rights legislation that was put in place in the UK that was not applied across the European Union. For example, the cruel practice of sow stalls is banned in the UK. There has been a recent call in the UK to boycott Parma ham because of welfare standards. There are also other politically charged issues in agriculture, such as the EU's decades-old Common Agricultural Policy, CAP, which pays subsidies to farmers to keep them farming their land regardless of sustainability issues. This policy-driven culture is believed to have been a fundamental factor in 2001 outbreak of foot-and-mouth disease, FMD, in the UK, because one way the disease spread was at markets where people were borrowing and mixing up each other's animals for head counts to apply for grants. If you're around my age or older, you'll remember the outbreak of bovine spongiform encephalopathy, BSE, mad cow disease, in the 1990s. Just as Spain was associated with the Spanish flu, the UK was associated with the prion protein disease in humans, variant Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, VCJD. When it is now thought at the time it was spontaneous variant that was found all over Europe at that time, with a significant cluster also arising in Spain. BSE is still frequently detected in cattle around the world, and there are 1.5 billion cows on this planet. But it rarely makes the news because the human disease is not as prevalent. But watch this space, I bet we will see headlines about prion protein diseases again this decade. Eating marine-grown seafood and fish, and therefore ingesting the bioaccumulated plastic they have eaten, may be the media's next mad cow moment, because nanocarbon is known to be able to enter our cells and move around our bodies in ways we are just beginning to understand. What health crisis will come from eating plastics? Only time and science will tell, but it's more likely than not to be bad news, unfortunately. pink slime, mock meat, and creepy crawlies. Would you drink synthetic milk? What if you couldn't taste the difference between a cow's milk from a farm and synthetic cow's milk from a lab? A lot of headlines have been generated by the advent of lab-based chicken nuggets, but not so many about some of the other consumables that are currently being created, tested and approved. Synthetic versions of natural fibres such as silk, effectively silk without the worms, and 3D printed lab-grown meat established from stem cell lines, steak without a cow. During the 1990s, there was a huge pushback against genetically modified GM plants, advancing to field trials. They were even called Frankenfoods, a play on Frankenstein's monster who was patched together from different dead people. Nowadays, we use GM crops without really hearing or knowing about it, but the idea of messing with the genetics of plants was enough to cause public outcry at the time. How will people perceive lab-grown, processed, printed, stem cell-based lines of meat, and how will it be marketed by modern and social media? And as someone who doesn't eat red meat, I'm in a conundrum about what to do with a 3D printed steak. I think the scientist in me would want to give it a try, and I would be extra happy that no animals were harmed in the making of my steak. Cultured meat, also known as cultivated meat, clean meat, or cell-based meat, is produced using tissue engineering techniques traditionally used in regenerative medicine. In 2013, Professor Mark Post at Maastricht University pioneered a proof of concept for cultured meat by creating the first hamburger patty grown directly from cells. Since then, other cultured meat prototypes have gained media attention. Supermeat opened a laboratory restaurant called The Chicken in Tel Aviv, Israel, to test consumer reaction to its chicken, in inverted commas, burger, while the world's first commercial sale of cell-cultured meat occurred in December 2020 at Singapore restaurant 1880. People buy processed meat products made up of pink slime, parts of the traditional meat processing where all the smallest offcuts of the meat are blitzed together and liquefied before being reformed as chicken Twizzlers or similar. If you can eat fast food products like these and feed them to your children, which use the lowest quality remnants of the meat production process, then surely you wouldn't mind your pink slime coming from a bioreactor in a lovely, clean lab with all the rules and regulations that control it. Mock meat, meat-like products made from plant-based ingredients, is another massive area of growth in the food industry. There are environmental and health concerns around these highly processed products, especially those that contain soy or palm oil, both of which are directly responsible for forest destruction in the world. Gluten-based seitan mock meats can be high in salt and fats in an effort to find that magic taste balance, which are not necessarily good for your health. Soy goes into vegetarian burgers, of course, but the majority of soy grown in places like Brazil is there because it's part of the animal feed supply chain. So we are growing soy and maize not for human consumption, but rather to export as animal feed to other parts of the world. After having been a slow burner for a few decades, veganism is finally upon us as a solid option. Believe me, trying to be a vegan in the 1990s was pretty hard. Thinking about all the Sosmix and bean burgers I suffered makes me shudder. Now veganism has gained influencer status, with music powerhouses such as Beyoncé and Adele publicly talking about their vegan diets. Those for whom veganism is a bit extreme are finding ways to be flexitarian, where they diversify what they'd normally eat and choose more plant-based options. Many people who love meat and will always continue to eat meat are also reducing their meat consumption, becoming reducitarians, who actively reduce the animal products they wear and consume, including leather and honey. In 2009, Paul McCartney and his daughters Mary and Stella started a movement called Meat Free Monday, which has taken conversations about what we are eating to dinner tables around the world. I do have a thing for the sausage rolls from the Linda McCartney vegetarian food range with tomato ketchup. Yum! CEOs have given TED Talks espousing the value of a meat-free week, and restaurants have instituted meat-free menus. There's even an annual Veganuary, a vegan January. It will be exciting to see what the increasingly scientific celebrity chefs of the world will do with their Michelin-starred creative brains to help produce the next food craze. My bet is on something to do with kelp. Who knows what else we could farm in the marine systems that don't carry the environmental burden of large-scale aquaculture, such as salmon farming does. Whether we all embrace veganism or not, we know that business as usual will no longer work in the future of protein production. It is ethically and environmentally impossible to feed the whole of the world the levels of protein that those of us in the West have grown accustomed to. The answer may be in insect-based protein, the thought of which may make you shudder, but stay with me on this. Have you ever been to a Southeast Asian country where people eat insects as a delicacy? I remember being culturally shocked as a young British woman doing my year in industry in Thailand and seeing people go to the bug stand for snacks. I'm actually disappointed in myself that I never tried them at the time. I'd lost my gumption. Insects are nutrient efficient compared to other meat sources. Crickets, for example, contain a similar amount of protein as soybeans and include mostly unsaturated fat. They also contain dietary fibre and some vitamins such as vitamin B12, riboflavin, vitamin A, as well as essential minerals. Locusts contain 8 to 20 milligrams of iron for every 100 grams of raw locust, whereas beef contains roughly 6 milligrams of iron per 100 grams. So you can see the macronutrient and micronutrient status of insects balances out against what we'd expect from meat or meat substitutes. There are 7 insect species that have been targeted as suitable for mass production and human consumption: mealworms, lesser mealworms, house crickets, tropical house crickets, European migratory locusts, black soldier flies, and house flies. It's unlikely the average Westerner will chow down on crispy bugs for lunch, so I predict instead a much more acceptable form of finely milled insect protein will be hidden in the form of protein shakes, high-protein flour, or as a base for soups or stews. I would definitely use insect protein powder much more readily than chewing on an exoskeleton. Would you? Farms of the future. As human population centres become more and more urbanised and we are faced with an acceleration in the growth of megacities, in part due to the effects of climate change, new problems emerge. How do we grow more food when we have less land and when the oceans and natural waterways are far away? One of the solutions is urban agriculture, which sounds oxymoronic, but it is a growing sector already. The Netherlands has been a huge leader in this space. Their poor quality reclaimed land polder soils are unproductive and have a distinct lack of earthworms, and there isn't the space to feed a growing population using traditional methods. With sea levels rising, some of their land may not be accessible at all in the next decade. These converging challenges have motivated the Dutch to invest heavily in closed-loop farming, where pigs, fish and vegetables are grown in an industrially connected mega warehouse system. The aquatic animals and micro-ecosystem clean the wastewater, and the pigs produce the fertiliser and get well fed at the same time. Some well-funded startups are working within the global tech world to utilise large warehouse facilities to create vertical farms without pigs, in which many vegetables and other plants are grown on hydroponic tables with many layers. They are automated in terms of their fertilisers and water use, and some of them don't even use soil anymore. These AI-driven precision farming techniques can be used en masse in a city location, possibly even downtown. We can farm on brownfield sites such as former ports or storage yards, old malls or areas of demolished low-cost housing. In Australia, vertical farms could also be established in regional areas to prevent the inflated pricing that happens when fresh fruit and vegetables are transported to remote communities. Can you think of any spaces around where you live that could be better used as spaces for vertical farming? Urban farms are automating more and more and diversifying the crops they produce, even using robotic drone bees to pollinate plants. Robotic drone bees might sound ridiculous, but we are facing a global bee crisis, and micro-robotics are a viable technical alternative. Until June 2022, Australia was the only major honey-producing country free from varroa mite, but now there is a biosecurity battle underway to eradicate an incursion in New South Wales, and I hope they eradicate it sooner rather than later. The death of the beautiful bee would mean massive food shortages and certainly less variability in the food we enjoy today. Imagine no more stone fruit, apples or honey. In countries where bees have already disappeared, humans can get jobs as pollinators. With little bags of pollen and a paintbrush, they climb ladders and walk miles to pollinate plants that a bee would normally pollinate. This is expensive, of course, if you are in a country with ethical labour laws, minimum wages and workers' rights. If tiny drones can fly around like bees and pollinate, well, labour laws and daylight restrictions do not apply to robots. Soon we'll be eating fresh fruit and vegetables that have never been touched by a human hand from plant to plate. The rise of the roboticized and automated farm is upon us. AI-backed technologies have already proven to be better than humans at aspects such as grading and packing avocados, picking and packing raspberries, and sorting shopping. Amazon holds global robotics competitions at which university researchers create robotic and automated systems that then compete as identification, picking and packing robots, and most are already more accurate and efficient than the humans who created them. Add automation to the types of plants that are grown, and soon we will have an agtech convergence, which will mean we will never have labour shortages of fruit pickers causing price hikes or food rotting in the fields because people can't get to it. This is what robots are best at, doing robotic, relentless, repetitive, boring tasks, and especially ones that come with health and safety issues. We will see farmers wearing exoskeletons, robotic sheepdogs, and autonomous drones checking fences and counting heads of livestock. We already have satellite tags for cattle to prevent livestock theft. Yes, that actually happens. And dairies that are fully automated to milk the cows when they choose to be milked. Nary a human will need to be nearby, but humans will still be involved, likely in remote operations and information management, as well as on-site maintenance. The suggestion that robots, drones and AI will remove all the people working in agriculture is a fallacy put forward by those who are scared to see modernisation and technologically driven solutions maximising food production. Remind you of Ned Ludd? The rise of the smart farm has also meant a rise in the amount of data being collected, collated, analysed and stored. There is scope for microanalysis on farms in which farmers can analyse metre by metre the productivity of a particular piece of land, and robots can look centimetre by centimetre for weeds to extract. There are also large-scale satellites that can look at general capabilities of the land to be used for agricultural production, such as soil carbon, erosion, water use and supply. Anyone who works in soil science knows this means huge generalisations, and the law of averages needs to be applied to natural systems when modelling potential land use, but these datasets are used more and more to predict agricultural viability and capacity. Some really interesting studies and spin-off businesses in Australia are going global in this area of smart farms. One of these is The Yield, which has recently entered the US market. It uses artificial intelligence to take local weather and environmental data, as well as field productivity down to a centimetre level scale in order to provide information about what should be planted and how it should be managed to maximise yields. Aside from the AI systems, some agricultural drones now have onboard processing, which means the drone itself analyses the field or paddock as it flies, and then does a return flight to spray particular fertilisers as needed, or maybe even precision spray herbicides. Protecting provenance. Once we produce all these wonderful agricultural products, we need to prove that they are what we say they are when we export them into global markets. As mentioned previously, there's been a lot of work done, especially here in Australia, looking at ways in which food provenance can be proven using innovations such as radio frequency identification, RFID, hiding really small microdot identifiers and even DNA testing. There are also regional airports developed purely for the export market, such as in Toowoomba, west of Brisbane, and these are proving to be incredibly lucrative for those involved, adding value to the provenance of goods and produce. The market for high-quality produce, particularly that which is ranked by the location it's produced in, means we have to find new technical and legal ways to fight the battle against food fakery. But how do you protect food provenance through legal mechanisms such as patents or trademarks? The French have been doing this for years with products such as champagne. It has to come from the Champagne region in France to be called champagne, otherwise it is a sparkling wine. If we can be assured of the provenance of the products that we are buying, we can make consumer power choices to make sure that we do not buy food products that have a significantly negative effect on the local environment or the people who are producing it. This gives more power back to the consumer, but also places ethical, social, moral, economic and legal obligations on the board of directors of the companies producing these foodstuffs to make sure that they are not causing deforestation in the rainforests of the world or unnecessarily polluting, such as causing fertilizer runoff into the ocean or have slaves involved in the supply chain. ESG investing has turned to the global food industry, and a closer lens will be placed on where things come from. Growing your own. Those of us who have the money, space and time can produce at least some of our own food. I know more and more people who are transporting part of their gardens back to the late 1940s when people grew most of their own vegetables in their very own victory gardens. When I lived in the northeast of England 20 years ago, gardeners were competing for space on government-owned land and veggie patches known as allotments, where they could grow their own produce. The same is happening across Australia today, with community gardens located in inner-city suburbs and even regional towns for those who don't have the space to grow their own at home. Cottage farming is the new artisan. The rise of sourdough bread baking during the pandemic is one example of how people are being reminded of our innate connection with the food we make and eat. Awareness of where food comes from is something that should be taught in schools. So should cooking, so that children grow up with the basic ability to cook things from scratch or from whatever is in the cupboard and fridge. This would allow more people to access food economically. Also, where are the high-tech AI-empowered community gardens? Get back in the driver's seat. Do you look at the label when you buy produce from the supermarket? Do you shop for it online? How often do you get to a farmer's market or maybe drive past a produce stand? There are many ways we can use our purchasing power when it comes to the source, supply chain and sustainability of the foodstuffs we choose. An easy place to start is to not let any food go to waste. In Australia, we discard more than 30% of all the food that we buy, and the carbon footprint caused by the landfill we create is more than what we create through the aviation industry. We need to stop wasting food and start paying the right price for produce, or better still, get the government to provide grants to producers who do the right thing. Between planning your food for the week, avoiding plastic packaging, and preventing waste through different recipes or storage methods, there is a lot we can do as individuals that can add up to a big collective difference. You could also check out charities such as Food Bank Australia and Oz Harvest Australia, and maybe buy a meal for a family you'll never meet. The cost of living is becoming a real issue, and the use of food charities is increasing. Lots of food for thought.